Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my continuation of my book reading of Stephen King's Cell. Hope you are doing fine. Let's continue, shall we? Goom! Cried the woman in her tattered blouse and threw away her half eaten cucumber. She had spewed a few late tomatoes, crawled towards them with her hair hanging in her face. The seat of her pants was totally soiled. The old man had spied the ornamental wheelbarrow. He took his pumpkin to it, then seemed to register George, sitting there beside it. He looked at him, head cocked. George gestured with one orange-coated hand at the wheelbarrow, a gesture Clay had seen 1,000 times. "Be my guest," Tom murmured. "I'll be damned." The old man fell on his knees in the garden, a movement that obviously caused him considerably pain. He grimaced, raised his lined face to the brightening sky, and uttered a scoffing grunt. Then he lifted the pumpkin over the wheel. He studied the line of the descent for several moments, elderly biceps trembling, and brought the pumpkin down, smashing it open. It fell in two meaty halves. What happened next happened fast. George dropped his own mostly eaten pumpkin in his lap, rocked forward, grabbed the old man's head in his big, orange-stained hands and twisted it. They heard the crack of the old man's breaking neck, even through the glass. His long white hair flew. Small spectacles disappeared into what Clay thought were beads. His body smashed once, then went limp. George dropped it. Alice began to scream, and Tom covered her mouth with his hand. Her eyes, bulging with terror, peered over the top of it. Outside in the garden, George picked up a fresh chunk of pumpkin and began calmly to eat. The woman in the shredded blouse looked around for a moment, casually, then plucked another tomato and bit into it. Red juice ran from her chin and trickled down the dirty line of her throat. She and George sat there in Tom McCourt's backyard garden, eating vegetables, and for some reason, the name of one of his favorite paintings dropped into Clay's mind, The Peaceable Kingdom. He didn't realize he'd spoken aloud until Tom looked at him bleakly and said, "Not anymore." The three of them were still standing there at the kitchen window 5 minutes later when an alarm began to bray at some distance. It sounded tired and hoarse, as though it would run down soon. "Any idea what that might be?" Clay asked. In the garden, George had abandoned the pumpkins and dug up a large potato. This had brought him closer to the woman, but he showed no interest in her. At least not yet. "My best guess would be that the generator at the Safeway in the center just gave up," Tom said. "There's probably a battery-powered alarm in case that happens because of all the perishables. But that's only a guess. For all I know, it's the first MALDEN bank and..." "Look," Alice said. The woman stopped in the act of plucking another tomato, got up, walked towards the east side of Tom's house. George got to his feet as she passed, and Clay was sure he meant to kill her as he had the old man. He winced in anticipation and saw Tom reaching for Alice to turn her away. But George only followed the woman, disappearing around the corner of the house behind her. Alice turned and hurried towards the kitchen door. "Don't let them see you," Tom called in a low, urgent voice, and went after her. "Don't worry," she said. Clay followed, worrying for all of them. They reached the dining room door in time to watch the woman in her filthy pants suit and George in his even filthier coverall pass beyond the dining room window, their bodies broken into segments by Venetian blinds which had been dropped but not closed. Neither of them glanced towards the house, and now George was so close behind the woman they could have bitten the nape of her neck. The nape of her neck? Alice, followed by Tom and Clay, moved up the hall to Tom's little office. Here the blinds were closed, but Clay saw the projected shadows of the two outside pass swiftly across them. Alice went on up the hall, towards where the door to the enclosed porch stood open. The comforter lay half on and half off the couch, as Clay had left it. The porch was flooded with brilliant morning sunshine. It seemed to burn on the boards. "Alice, be careful," Clay said. But she had stopped. She was just looking. Then Tom was standing beside her, almost exactly the same height. Seen that way, they could have been brother and sister. Neither of them took any pains at all to avoid being seen. "Holy fucking shit," Tom said. He sounded as if the wind had been knocked out of him, beside him. Alice began to cry. It was a sort of out-of-breath weeping a tired child might make. One who was becoming used to punishment. Clay caught up. The woman in the pantsuit was cutting across Tom's lawn. George was still behind her, matching her stride for stride. They were almost in lockstep. That broke a little bit of the curb when George swung out to her left, becoming her wingman instead of her back door. Salem Street was full of crazy people. Clay's first assessment was that there might be 1,000 or more. Then the observer part of him took over. The cold-hearted artist's eye, and he realized that was a wild overestimate prompt by surprise at seeing anyone at all on what he expected would be an empty street. I shook at realizing that were all them. There was no mistaking the vacant faces, the eyes that seemed to look beyond everything, the dirty, bloody, disheveled clothing, in several cases no clothing at all, the occasional cawing cry or jerky gesture. There was the man dressed only in tidy whitey undershorts and a polo shirt, who seemed to be saluting repeatedly. The heavy-set woman whose lower lip was split and hung in two beefy flaps, revealing all of her lower teeth. The tall teenage boy in blue jeans shorts who walked up the center of Salem Street carrying what looked like a blood-caked tire iron in one hand, an Indian or Pakistani gentleman who passed Tom's house, wriggling his jaw from side to side and simultaneously chattering his teeth. A boy, dear God, a boy Johnny's age, who walked with absolutely no sign of pain, although one arm was flapping below the knob of his dislocated shoulder. A pretty young woman in the short skirt and the shell top, who appeared to be eaten from the red stomach of a crow. Some moaned, some made vocal noises that might once have been words, and all were moving east. Clay had no idea if they were being drawn by the broiling alarm or the smell of food, but they were all walking in the direction of Malden Center. "Christ, it's zombie heaven," Tom said. Clay didn't bother answering. The people out there who weren't exactly zombies. But Tom was pretty close. Just the same. If any of them looked over here, sees us, and decides to come after us, we're done. We won't have a hope in hell. Not even if we barricade ourselves in the cellar. And getting those guns across the street, you can forget that. The idea that his wife and son might be, very likely were, having to deal with creatures such as these filled him with dread. But this was no comic book, and he was no hero. He was helpless. The three of them might be safe in the house, but as far as the immediate future was concerned, It didn't look like he and Tom and Alice were going anywhere. And with this, I'm gonna stop it for this book reading. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.